Alright, so I've never done one of these build vids. We're going to give it a shot, but right now, this is pretty much what I got going on. We are going to take the Riot Control flight controller and put it in the CL1 frame. Got a little fanboyish a little bit. I even got the God battery prep, or battery sticky pad. Fuck. I have seriously really liked the runcam Eagles. This one's the micro because I like the small form factor. I'm a super big fan of these DYS Aria 35 amps. They're the 32 bits, so they go in my build. I've heard nothing but good things about these Primo's motors. A few people have said they're really good. I've never flown those, so this will be the first build with this motor on. These are the 2207s, 2650 kVs. These are my skids. And of course, I'm going to put a Unify Pro V3. So we're going to put this guy in and see how it works. I'll probably rip this connector off. I don't like these connectors. I always rip them off. So stay tuned, guys. This is going to be hopefully not a long vid. I'm going to edit. I'm going to try and capture some different angles so it's not so boring. But this is my first time doing it. Here we go. Alright, first off, let's take this out of the package and see what we're working with. So I know this, DYS made this flight controller for Rotor Riot, and this looks exactly, with the exception if this is black, normally it's yellow. So this is the Rotor Riot flight controller, and it has the soft mount gyro, which is the new feature that some of the other ones don't have. It has a pass-through ribbon cable, I don't know if you can see that. Kind of goes through to that side. But we're just going to set this aside and keep going along. Next, let's take the runcam out. Alright, so standard, this new little menu button plate. Here's the Eagle. This is a really nice camera. And I like it because everything on the front side between the camera and the board is completely sealed. So what I do is I'll take the sticker off temporarily and then conformal coat this area right in here, and then put the sticker back on, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I have one more of these to open up, so let's just get it open. I don't use this. I save these just in case I need them, which is the heat shrink, so this is going to go in the trash along with this. And here are my ESCs. Now, one thing I really like about these ESCs is the silicone wires. These signal wires, they used to not be silicone, and so when you would try and solder them, especially the ground, the wire would just kind of shrink up and expose itself, and I really hated that. But these don't do that anymore. So another thing I do, and I won't film all of this, but I cut this heat shrink off. I don't leave the heat shrink on. And the reason is, I guess it's just really preference. It doesn't do, you know, anything for me except I would rather conformal coat this. And I will show you how I do one of these. I won't show you all of them, but I will show you how you do one of these. So I take the heat shrink off and I conformal coat all the way. I also put a piece of foam tape. I use this stuff right here in between the frame and the ESC. Next, let's take this out of the package, which is the VTX. So I will use this sticky pad over the other one that I have, only because this is thinner and it came with it. So why use my stock when I don't need to? Don't use the heat shrink. I actually just throw it away. I don't use it at all. And I do the same thing to this that I do with my ESCs, which is I just go ahead and take the heat shrink off. I don't like the heat shrink. I like having access to everything if I need it. This stuff is a little tougher because it's like more like a plastic heat shrink than it is an actual, like, I don't know what the other stuff's made of, if I'm being honest. So I always take this heat shrink off. I'm sure TBS would not recommend this, or maybe they don't care. I don't know. But I take this off And then another thing I'm going to do, I take this connector off right here, and I will just hard solder right on the back, and I will use this as my pinout. I need to do some research and make sure that it has smart audio, but something I'm noticing that I didn't notice ever before is right here they have these little side pieces in case this connector breaks or you lift a pad or something, so you got a backup, so that's really nice to have. Next is the God sticky pad. This thing is awesome. It really saves your batteries. The only thing I don't like about it is a pain in the ass to trim. And I'm going to have to at least cut this in half to make it fit on that frame. I could just look at it and tell. Alright, let's get some of this trash out of the way. So, and this is the new CL1 frame. I have not even looked at this or anything, but I like that it comes with a 3D print cam mount. Not a huge fan of the blue, but whatever. If I had the choice, I would make it orange, but I don't have a choice. So we're just gonna go with that and deal with the blue, because blue's not bad, it still stands out. I'm gonna leave those in the bags for now. That's the rest of the hardware. But I really want to look at this carbon, because this is supposed to be a budget frame, and I'm really curious to see how cheap they went on the carbon. It doesn't look that bad, if I'm being honest. There's the top plate, bottom base. Oh wow, they already recessed these. That's kind of nice. So these come with these little inserts for the screw holes, and they're already done. Like, it comes from the factory that way. It's not like, I don't know if you guys ever had the Alien frame. You had to put those in, and that was kind of not so much a pain in the ass, but it was just extra work. So these arms actually look pretty decent. They're really, really thick. I was curious because it's not listed on the website what thickness they are, but they are definitely 5 millimeters. So let's zero this out. Bam. So the top plate, in case anyone else is wondering, is 2 millimeters. Bottom plate is also 2 millimeters, and this piece is going to be also 1.5. It's not quite 2 millimeters. This piece is a 1.5 millimeters. Yep, like that. And then this will probably just go over the top like that. There. So that's everything. Now the receiver I'm going to use is going to be the Crossfire. It's currently in this guy, but I'm going to rob the Crossfire out of this. Alright, so first things first, I guess let's get this hardware out now that everything is out. Hardware doesn't look like anything special. It's a budget frame, so it's probably using budget parts. I'm okay with that. Ship breaks anyway, so. But let's get that bottom plate and the arms built so we know where things are going to go. So this obviously goes like that. And that's going to go like that. So I imagine these longer ones are what's going for it. So I'm going to stick those in like so. And then just go ahead and start assembling. Here's a tip. Do not screw down or tighten down all your screws before everything's assembled. 80% of you already know this. Yeah, this is a relatively simple build, and shout out to Drew or whoever came up with this design. I really like that you have the 20 millimeter and the 30 millimeter standoffs and that they're through holes, so the hardware on the bottom doesn't get damaged in a crash, because they're gonna get damaged if they were sticking up. I know all my other frames that have some kind of nick or something on that. So there's the bottom half. Something I like to do is get these inner standoffs installed so I can work around them. Or while I'm doing this, I should also talk about that on the rear end of this frame. I don't know if you could see, but there are 4 20mm holes for another stack if you needed to put another stack. I know some people like to use the VTXs that offer that 20x20 stack feature, and if for some reason with your PDB and your flight controller or anything else you have in your stack you don't have the room, which I don't know why, because these are tall standoffs. I'm eventually going to change these out to shorter. I prefer 20mm. These are a little bit longer than 20mm. Let me find a spot. There we go. They are 30s, so I prefer them 10mm shorter, but that's just my preference. I will note that the front to back is pretty narrow as well. This being the back, this being the front. So that's how it's going to go when it's all said and done, and this is what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. So this is how I like to start. And then I start pretty much with my flight controller, and I put that here, except that's going to go like that. Ooh, not a fan of that, guys. I don't like the side. That's just my preference. I just noticed that the arrow's pointing this way, so that's front. That's how it's going to sit. I would prefer this to be in the back. I don't know what I'm going to do about this. I may just run some long leads back this way. So let's get this hardware mounted. Actually, no. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm recording. So the next thing I'm going to do, so I'm going to lay the frame aside and bring my little helping hands over. Make some room, because the next step is to conformal coat. I conformal coat everything. Let's just slide out that connector. Come on. Alright, there. Gyro's removed. Just remember the orientation. Well, it only goes in one way. So we're going to set that aside and just do yourself a favor. Don't get any conformal coat on this right here. If you get conformal coat in here, you're pretty much screwed. It'll be really hard to get it out, and it will not make contacts with this. So I'm going to orient it to sit like this. Now, you guys can't tell, but this is down, so it won't seep in this direction. So always conformal coat if you can. Use this stuff, the silicone modified conformal coating. It's the best I've found. It's really thin, does not take a large layer. So I conformal coat first, tin second, and then conformal coat again, where I went ahead and did all my solders, because, well, when you solder over it, it goes away. So I coat everything, and I also double check with my black light over here. I bought a black light just for that, only because I had a quad that was conformal coated and it seemed to short out. And even though it was conformal coated, I couldn't figure out why. So the only way really to check is with a UV light, also known as a black light. This conformal coat illuminates under those wavelengths, those light waves, and you could double check. So and sure enough, there was a few spots that I missed on that flight controller. So once I fixed that, all those problems went away when it got wet. But mine is this. And it just looks like that. And when you light it up, see how everything is all bright? And I could already see a few spots that I missed. There. That looks pretty coated. In fact, when we turn the light off and just illuminate it, you can really see the spots that you missed and whatnot, and it doesn't look like I missed anything. So let's turn the light on. Let's go ahead and flip this guy over. Now also the USB and the boot button. Now I don't use the boot button. I just plug it in and go to CLI command and type in I think it's DFU or it's BL. It's one of the two. It used to be one, now it's the other. So if one doesn't work, try the other. But that just puts the flight controller right into boot mode, so I never have to use the boot button. If you didn't know that, now you do. There's a cool little trick that you can now use. So, and then I'm just going to let this dry. And while I'm letting this dry, I'm going to go ahead and conformal coat the rest of my components. Meaning that I'm going to coat the VTX, I'm going to coat my ESCs, I'm going to coat the back of my cam. I don't want water to get on anything electronic, because that's how I roll. There has been the question, how do you, let's turn this, protect this? How do you protect the USB? You protect it with this. This is dielectric grease. So just get a little bit on there, like so, and then just stick it in and rub it around. What you want to do is you want to make sure you coat everything in there. Now, you will still be able to access it via your USB cable. This is not going to inhibit that. For the USB, because you can screw up your 5-volt power supply if they short out through that connector if you get it wet. Alright, well, while we wait for that to dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this TBS connector off, and I'm just going to chop it up. Well, that works. That's how you do it. I don't know if you can see that there. So the connector's gone, but those pads still exist, and they still reflect that. So vids to the inside, 5-volt to the outside, audio and ground, or the other places. So I just prefer to hard solder. Alright, now we're going to get this flight controller mounted. I found the hardware that's going to use. We're going to use to hold it in place. They are going to be M3 by, it's like 12 millimeters. And these little spacers that come with the flight controller. I just want to point out that these, this hardware did not come with the flight controller. You must provide it. Oh, I'm sure you probably noticed, like, hey, those aren't blue standoffs, those are different ones. Yeah, so I found a set of 20 millimeter standoffs, so I'm going to be able to make this guy slammed like I wanted to. You see, the 12 millimeter just gives you a couple threads to work with. You need 12 millimeter or longer. You probably get away with like even 14 millimeter would be better. Let's find some nuts. See, I got a bunch of alien hardware, so let's just find some red nuts and go with that. These are always a pain in the ass to get on, but once you get it started, bam, there's one. I always found it easier to go across. So like, say you got this one on, don't go here, go over here, diagonally, and push that corner down. It'll be a little tougher to get this one nut on, but it makes these two a lot easier to put on. There we go. And that's all mounted. So let's get the soldering iron on, because now we're going to tin. Oh, hell yeah. This is nice, Rotor Riot. This large layout, that is way better than this micro layout that, you know, DYS normally provides, which is like almost, hell, even this side's bigger than this. Oh yeah, I got this gyro box that's elevated. I gotta be mindful of that. If you're wondering what that bubbling is, that's the conformal coating that we put on earlier. And that boiling is completely normal. So that is a nicely tinned board. Alright, so normally a lot of people say build inside out or outside in. I kind of do the flight controller, then I do outside in. I like having my components kind of installed so I know what it's going to look like. So now I'm going to mount all my motors. In Rotor Riot, it would have been nice to have slots. I'm sure that would have cost a little bit more money. You're limiting the motors that can go on this thing now by not putting slots on. So what I do is I have a roll of tape, and I just cut it the width of it, and stick it on, and then I'm going to use that to stick it on to prevent any kind of arcing between the frame and the ESC itself. I usually like to try and keep the ESCs closer to the frame, not so far out, only because I want as much weight towards the center. I mean, where this gyro technically is going to be the center. Once you get the top plate and the battery on, this is going to be like the center of gravity. And the closer you keep things in, I feel the better. So we're going to start like right there. And that's where that guy's going to sit. So there. Now I know this is a fucking clusterfuck. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to trim all of these wires to whatever length I need them to be. So this is how I do the motor wires. You know, I take the motor wire, I string it across, and see the back of the pad? That's where I cut it at. So that when you trim it, that's what it looks like when it's on. Just nice and clean. So what I'm going to do later is, I know I'm twisting these up, but I'm going to untwist the ends and wrap it around this nut. So there it is. All the wires have been trimmed. It's no longer a giant mess. And now comes the boring part of tinning everything else. Alright, so we're just going to solder these up since everything's already kind of warm. I don't bother crossing or anything. I do all my configuration in BL Heli Suite, so I try and keep it straight to look as nice and clean as possible. Alright, so now that we got the motors wired up, let's go ahead and start tinning these ESC wires and get those wired up. So the goal here is to make sure you don't like squish the wires down. You just want to let the solder melt and flow. You heat the part you're soldering to over the top of the other solder ball, and if you did it right, everything just kind of melts together and you have a really good solder joint. Alright, now that we got all those done, let's go ahead and tin these signal wires. Yeah. Sometimes it's a pain in the ass to get these behind the nuts, but I still like their location. Alright, ESCs are done. Alright, so the next thing to do now, back, front, is to figure out where this VTX is going to go. So anyways, so this is the back. I normally like flow it like that, or I may flow it like that with a wrap that comes around like this. I don't know. Maybe if I do it like that and cross it over, except my wires are over there, I'd prefer to have it this way. It's just sometimes that might work like that. Let's get you centered like right there. That's good. Let's get this trash out of the way. And we're just gonna let you hang right there. Now, I should have looked to see what those connectors were, because I forgot. But that's what the old Google's for. So this was, which model was this? Unify Pro V3. Sometimes it's not fun looking for the right image that's going to tell you exactly the information you need. Let's see if I can zoom in on one of these other images. Maybe this one. Alright, so vid, audio, ground, 5 volts. Inside to outside. So, first off, let's just tin it. I know there's a little bit of solder, but I always like to add my own. Doesn't take much. You don't want a lot of solder on it because you don't want to create a bridge. It's the worst thing you can do in this situation. They're so close, it's easily accomplished. Alright. Get your wires, and we're just going to go ahead and cut this connector off because I don't need it. It doesn't take much to make this joint. Just a little bit of heat, hold it in place, and there it is. There you go. Yeah, I didn't think that was a good buy. Why does that keep popping off? I don't know. Add a little more solder, see what happens. Let's get this tip nice and clean. That's a lot better. Just yanking on each one individually to make sure it's a nice, decent bond. It doesn't have to be the strongest because it's not going to be under stress, but you just want it to make connections. So now I'm just going to double check to make sure there's no bridges. It's the last thing we want. I got a magnifying glass, so that's how I check. We ain't the cleanest build in the world, but I don't see any bridges. If you do suspect a bridge, you can either reflow and resolder, or you do what I do, and I take an X-Acto knife and I try and go right in between each one, to make sure everything's all cut. So we're just gonna go this way, and I'm gonna cut a little bit to right about here for these two, which is the hot and ground, and over here for the audio. Ground is right here. Positive is right here, and this is 5 volts. Make sure you're on the right pad. And then audio, I believe that I have that set up for TX3. We're gonna go way over here. that. Alright, so now it's off to the cam. So let's get the camera connector and wires out. When you have a group of wires like this, it's always a good idea to twist them up. Or braid them. Braid them is even better, but if you twist them up, they stay together. They do a pretty good job at not getting tangled and keeping your build looking pretty clean. For now it'll work. I'll just, like I said, make sure I have a lot of slack. So I'm going to push this up and then go across and just cut it like right there. Now save this. Don't toss this, because in time, I promise you, this wire is going to wear out. And this is your backup. Cut it in half, you solder this to the board, now you have a whole nother pigtail, and that plugs right in and right there. I'm not sure if runcam designed it that way, but that's what I've been doing, and it's been flawless since. Alright, well there's the cam, the wire. I'm not happy, again, like I don't like where this is gonna sit. I'd rather it sit like right here, right there. I like the lens just in front of the standoffs. I know some people like them further so they're protected, but I haven't had any issues. I don't do any more head-on collisions as much as I used to anymore, so. And I probably cut this a little longer than I would normally, but I'm just going to leave it. This is the standoff that came with it, alright? Right here. So the standoff that came with it, I'm not going to use those. I like to use these. If you print your own stuff and you find one thing of this is what it looks like. It's just 3 holes, but what it does is it folds over like so, and then it slides over your standoffs. Anyways, it works really, really, really well. Basically, how it works, slide one up, slide the other out, slide at the top. Maybe 20 millimeters isn't going to work for this one. I don't know. You see how much more forward that is? So I could get that on a little bit better. So here's my receiver. I use the Crossfire, and this is the Nano. Now, something that I've noticed that I've had to do is this UFL connector likes to break off a lot. So place it in a position where you can get to that connector relatively easy. Another thing that I'm probably going to do is I'm going to drill 2 holes in this carbon bottom plate so I can run a zip tie up and over and capture that UFL connector, or the UFL cable that holds it on place. Ground is in the back, so let's do the hot first then. I never remember which ones transmit, which ones receive. So what I normally do is I just guess, and then when I plug everything in to do the test, if it's not working, I'll just roll these 2 wires right here at this solder pad, and 100% of the time that resulted. But we're putting it on TX and RX6, so don't, in the configurator, you got to make sure you select UART6, otherwise you're not going to get any communication. Looks like we're done with the build. Let's put these last 2 standoffs on and get this top plate on and give you guys a final shot. So there it is. There's my build. Hope you guys enjoyed the vid. If you liked it, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll do some more. I don't have any more builds in the future, but if you like this sort of content for me, yeah, I'll continue it. If not, just tell me how bad I sucked and I won't do this again. So talk to you later. Peace.